But let's look at the bones. The bone is the skeleton, right? So everything around, everything that's carried on the bones is soft, is represents the that's that which is malleable and that which is open to interpretation. But the bone is the core. Go to our website, which is HebrewLearningCircles.org. Go to Jewish Resources, scroll down to Parsha Videos, and you'll find the source sheet right there. Let's jump in. It's Parshat BeShalah. This is the epic story of the Pharaoh finally letting the Israelites slaves leave, and the miracle of the crossing of the sea. And for our purpose, the most important part of the story that the Ishbitzer is going to comment on today is the fact that the Pharaoh changes his mind after he lets them leave. And they're 3 days into their journey. They're at the shore of the Sea of Reeds, and the Pharaoh is now chasing them with his chariots and an army. And then one other piece, and we'll see that in a moment. I'm going to read the verses. Is that God decides to lead them not through the short path, which would have been along the coast of the Mediterranean through the land of the Philistines, but rather take them deep into the desert and away from the Philistines. And those two parts of the story are important to our discussion today. So the verses, if you'd like to look it up, are Exodus chapter 13, 17. It skips 18 and then verse 19. Vayehi b'shalach paro et ha'am v'lo nacham Elohim derech eretz Plishtim ki karov hu ki amar Elohim pen inacham ha'am bir'otam milchama v'shavu Mitzrayma. And in English, now when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although it was nearer. For God said, the people, meaning the Israelites, may have a change of heart when they see war, meaning the Philistines would resist their crossing through the land and return to Egypt. And then 2 verses forward, Vaikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef imo, ki hashbea hishbia et bnei Israel לאמור, פקוד יפקוד אלוהים אתכם, והעליתם את עצמותי מזה איתכם. And in English, and Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had exacted an oath from the children of Israel, saying, God will be sure to take notice of you. Then you shall carry up my bones from here with you. And for those who are not familiar with that piece of the story, this is Joseph is the son of Jacob, one of the 12 sons, who has preceded them, has arrived in Egypt 21 years, I believe, before them, rose to the powerful position of the second to the Pharaoh, and was managing all of Egypt, the economy specifically, on behalf of the Pharaoh. So when the Jacob and the 12 brothers and their families, or 70 altogether, came to Egypt because of the famine, Joseph was there to welcome them and to help them get settled in Egypt and do well. And before he died, he asked that his bones would be carried up with him when they are going back to their ancestral land in Canaan or Israel. You will see in a moment that the Ishbitzer is going to ask the question, why is taking up the bones of Joseph, meaning excavating, taking him out of his, or maybe he probably was mummified, taking him out of his grave or wherever he was, some kind of pyramid, or wherever his body was kept, so many years later, 200 and some years later, and carrying him to burial with his ancestors in the land of Canaan. A few questions. Leaving Egypt, according to Kabbalah, effectuated, and the Hebrew term here is berur, spiritual refinement or reformation for the Jewish people. Yet things did not go smoothly once they left, as we have just reviewed. The question is why? They were freed from Egypt. Things should have been hunky-dory. They're now free. But that wasn't the case. Why? How did Moses, as leader, react internally to these surprising new challenges? Moses took along the bones of Joseph, as was requested many, many generations prior. What did those symbolically represent? And obviously the Ishbitzer is going to show us that there's a deeper meaning to all that. What is the best attitude with which to meet our own unanticipated spiritual challenges? And I hope that we can dig a little deeper into that for ourselves as we explore this piece of Torah. So here's the Ishbitzer. Inyan smichat hapsukim. Dehinei kasher ראה משה רבינו עליו השלום, כי אף אחר שיגאלו, עוד פרעה הולך אחריהם ללוותם, עלה בדעתו ספק, כן עדיין לא נשלמו ישראל בתכלית השלמות. So the Ishbitzer says, what is this about these two verses being in proximity to one another? First verse about God taking them the long way deeper into the desert, and the second verse is taking up the bones of Joseph. And he says, it looks as if when Moses, our teacher, may peace be upon him, saw that after they have been redeemed, they went out into freedom, all of a sudden the Pharaoh is chasing after them. And there was a doubt in his mind whether the people have come into their wholeness, spiritual wholeness, which meant that they're not done with the Pharaoh, right? The Pharaoh still needs to be in an interaction with them. Obviously, you can hear that there's an assumption here that when challenges come our way, or when that challenge came that way, that meant that they needed that challenge. Or when challenges come our way, that means that there's a reason for it. That challenge is there to serve a purpose in our lives. It's a difficult concept, difficult for me. I like to believe it's not so, but that is a foundational, actually, in Jewish mysticism, a foundational thought in other mystical traditions as well. Upenhu mechamat שהוזמן הרב במצרים, לכן יש לו צד שייכות עמהם. And it could be that it's because they spent so much time in Egypt that the Pharaoh was relevant to their journey, both literally and figuratively. וגם מראותו, כי לא נחם אלוקים דרך ארץ פלישתים פנחם עם, and also when Moses saw that God did not guide them through the short way through the land of the Philistines, because God was concerned that they would get discouraged and change their mind, and as the verse said, go back to Egypt. גם מזה הבין, כי עוד לא נשלמו בתכלית הבירור. And that also, compounded or reinforced his assumption that their purification was not yet complete. So interesting. I want to pause here for a second. We'll continue with the Ishbitzer in a moment, but I want to pause here and let's take in the enormity of that. They've been through generations, centuries of slavery, and it is purposeful. And the dramatic 10 plagues are now complete, and they're finally released. And then, no, it's not done yet. There's more. And the two challenges that Moses is looking at is, one, the fact that the Pharaoh changes his mind and is now chasing them again into the desert. And then, God is not taking him the short way. God is taking him the long way. There's more struggles, more challenge to deal with in Moses' growing understanding. V'hinei ita. And here it is brought, Avot Pei Gimel Mem Yud Aleph, in the Ethics of the Fathers. He's going to bring something from the Mishnah, a verse from the Mishnah. Kol she'irat chet'o kodemet lechochmato, chochmato mitkayemet. And this is the Mishnah saying, anyone whose fear of sin, it says chet'o, his own or her own sin. Anyone who's concerned about their good standing, I would say their ethics, precedes their wisdom. And here typically this is understood as precedes their learning, right? So often we, I think the way I read this Mishnah is that it's talking about those who really are intellectually capable and curious and love to study a lot of Torah, but they're not practicing. They're not really being meticulous about one's good standing, right, in society with God, etc. Right. So the Mishnah is saying that anyone who's cares more about their ethics than their learning stands. Okay, chochmato mitkayemet. That's a Mishnah. So how is this related to the issue at hand, to the parsha, those verses in the parsha? And the Ishbitzer continues. והעניין בזה, לפי שלפעמים נמצא שהשם יתברך מעלים מעשיו ומסתיר כוונתו מבני אדם. And the way this is relevant is that sometimes the blessed God conceals God's true actions and hides God's true intention from human beings. Ve'ein adam yodea et ratzon Hashem yitbarach be'esek hazeh. And a person does not know what God's true will is in any given circumstance. Usually, these are things that are happening to us, right? So the way I read it is often things are happening to me or to you, and you may ask yourself, what does God want here? What is this for? Especially when it's hard, right? Like, my God, what did I do to deserve this? That's usually the one way that we express that sentiment, right? So we don't know what is this about? What for? Moshe העניין כאן, שהיה לפלא בעיני משה, למה לא נחם השם דרך ארץ פלישתים? Just like here in our story, in our verse here, that it was a mystery in Moses' eyes. For what purpose did God guide them away from the land of the Philistines, the shorter path? והעצה לזה, שאם רואה האדם שהשם יתברך מנהיג עמו בהסתר. And the explanation to this is that if a person sees that the blessed God is dealing with him or her in a hidden, in an obscure way, אז לא ירבה להתחכם, רק יעסוק בפשוטי מצוות. Then a person should not try to overanalyze, רק יעסוק, but a person should default and busy oneself with the basic mitzvot, with the basic spiritual commitments. ויכלול עצמו במידת היראה, and should immerse him or herself in the quality of fear or awe. In other words, this is a time to humble oneself, to recognize that there's something bigger that I'm not grasping that is happening. And in order to stay attuned, to stay connected, let me go to my basic spiritual commitment. וזה, ויקח משה את עצמות יוסף וכולי. And this is what it means that Moshe took the bones of Joseph. Well, what does that have to do with defaulting to simple practice of my spiritual practice, my spiritual commitment, the mitzvot, in our case? So he's going to explain. דרך הצדיק שתולה חיסרון בעצמו, שיונה לפניו דבר ספק. Since it is the way of the righteous that he or she will take upon him or herself the weakness is on me. Whatever I'm missing, the missing is in me. Whenever a person finds him or herself in a place of doubt and questioning. And this is what it means that Moses, took Joseph's bones. That means that Moshe took it upon himself that it is his incompleteness that is being worked through. I don't understand what God wants. There's something that I need to perfect in myself. In other words, is what Moses is saying. And again, what does that have to do with Joseph's bones? And I wonder if anything is arising for you in terms of an answer. What do bones, or the bones of Joseph, the holy Joseph, right, have to do, which he himself is known as Tzaddik Yesod Olam, that he was known as the archetype of the righteous person. And yet, what does that have to do with carrying his bones? That's why Moses put himself in the psychic space or the psychic quality of fear. And fear here means fear, discipline, focus, humility, yielding and surrendering to to God's ultimate greatness and ultimate wisdom, even though it's not apparent in that moment. And the scripture says, "Ki atzmot Yosef romez al zeh." The bones of Joseph hint to that. Ki midat Yosef HaTzadik haya irah, because the quality, the signature quality of Joseph, the saint, was fear, or fear of God. As is, he's going to bring a proof text from the prophet Amos, chapter 5, verse 6, and it says, "Pen itzlach ke'esh beit Yosef," and there it says, "Pen that the house of Joseph had the quality of fire." And here, the quality of fire is hinting to, that sense of fear of risk. And this is not an external risk. This is the fear of an internal risk of risking the wholeness, the completeness, and the purity of one's own soul, own psyche. וזהו כל שאירת חטאו קודמת לחוכמתו. And this is what the Mishnah says when it says that any person whose fear of their own misdeeds precedes their wisdom. That's what the Mishnah is pointing to. V'hu midat Yosef HaTzadik, and because that is the exact quality, signature quality of the saint Joseph, may peace be upon him. Often, the tradition, the Hasidic tradition, starting from the Baal Shem Tov and through the many generations of great saintly rebbes and masters that came after him, including the Ishbitzer, usually they highlight the more compassionate, the more loving, the more they try to connect us with sort of the soft, loving part of God and loving part of the tradition and of the path of spiritual path in the Jewish context. And this teaching is a little unusual in the sense that it's really owning and embracing the other side of that. So sometimes there is room for that. There's room for what about humility and awe and trembling and discipline for the sake of discipline and being sharp and being and making the effort required and being concerned and doing the work, resorting to the practice without compromise, without looking for ways to talk myself out of the challenge of the hard part of the work that one needs to do with oneself in order to grow, to grow spiritually. So in this way, this is an unusual teaching. It's not, it's not the flavor, the beautiful flavor that attracts so many of us to the Hasidic teachings. So I want to honor here honor that piece, that trait of Joseph, which is a trait of fear. Another piece that's really interesting here is that so he makes the point that the bones of Joseph And then the emphasis on Joseph and there's a lot of midrashim apropos that carrying the bones with them, save them on the merit of the holy forefather, and that there's a power, the magical power to those bones, and that saved them and that carried them through the desert, and there are those teachings. But let's look at not Joseph, but let's look at the bones. The bone is the skeleton, right? So everything around, everything that's carried on the bones is soft, represents that's that which is malleable and that which is open to interpretation. But the bone is the core, right? It's the hard core that carries the practice, that carries the path, that carries the tradition. And there's a time to preserve that and carry that with us, right? So I think that the bones of Joseph, the word bones, is very telling here. It's also consistent with the quality of the fear of God, and also the last thing that they feel is powerful here is that sometimes when we think that we can rest on our laurels, right? We've been redeemed. We've been successful. We've accomplished, and I'm talking more of internal accomplishment. I've worked really hard, and I'm savoring. I'm recognizing that I overcame something, and I'm liberated now. Right? I'm liberated from whatever I was working on, some traits and some behaviors and some attitudes, and I'm overcoming it, and I'm transforming, and I'm becoming a better person. And then that joy lasts for 3 days because the next challenge is going to be knocking on the door, right? And how humbling that is, right? Often God's pace of sending challenges our ways is much quicker than we care to. We'd like to be on vacation for a little longer. And it's just a reminder that indeed sometimes that's how it is, and it's another opportunity to humble and to live in that mystery and roll with that mystery and spend 40 years in the desert in the mystery until the next redemption comes our way, or until we earn the next redemption, right? So may we all be blessed that every day of our life gives us the opportunity and the strength to go back to first principles, to our practices, do the work, even if we do not understand, we do not know what the plan is quite yet. Shalom for now. Click subscribe button. Doesn't cost you anything. We really appreciate that. Like to have that extra layer of connection with you. Like and subscribe. Come back. Boy says so ahava